Thursday afternoon at Bellerive, Scottie Scheffler walked toward the scoring tent with his chin buried in his chest, looking completely unrecognizable from the man who had torn apart the field just 96 hours earlier. There was no trademark smirk, no relaxed stride, and no sense of total ownership over the golf course. Instead, the world's top-ranked player looked utterly drained, clutching a scorecard that recorded one of the most baffling opening rounds of his modern career. Standing near the perimeter, watching every move with an intense, analytical gaze, was Phil Mickelson. At 56 years old, Phil has spent over 3 decades inside the ropes of elite golf. He has witnessed iconic meltdowns, legendary surrenders, and sudden breakdowns of absolute titans. He knows the precise look a champion gives off right before their game unravels. Yet even Phil appeared stunned by the sheer speed of what had just transpired. Scottie had not just played a poor round, he had lost complete command of his golf ball in a matter of 2 hours. The shift was violently abrupt. On the par 4 fourth, Scottie stood over a 4-foot par putt, a routine mechanical tap-in he had converted hundreds of times this season. But when the putter blade moved, the ball did not just miss the cup, it skittered so far offline, catching the high lip and running 2 feet past, that an audible gasp echoed through the gallery. That single bizarre miss sent a shiver through the tournament grounds. Phil watched closely as the composure of modern golf's most untouchable player fractured in real time. Was this sudden collapse driven by a hidden physical illness sapping his strength? Or had something structural inside Scottie's world-class mechanics finally snapped under the mounting pressure of the FedEx Cup playoffs? Before we dive into what Phil saw on that front nine, drop a comment below letting me know which city or country you're watching from today, and hit that subscribe button to stay locked into our daily golf breakdowns. To understand why this opening round sent shockwaves through the gallery, you have to rewind just 4 days. On Sunday afternoon at St. Jude, Scottie Scheffler did not merely win a golf tournament, he dismantled the entire field with an 8-shot victory that felt almost robotic in its precision. His iron play was suffocating, his ball striking was immaculate, and his demeanor suggested a player operating entirely without friction. Heading into the BMW Championship as the defending champion, the consensus across the golf world was unanimous. Scottie was effectively untouchable, and the FedEx Cup crown was already his to lose. That absolute aura of invincibility is what made the atmosphere at Bellerive so surreal on Thursday morning. But if you looked closely at the warm-up range before his tee time, the early signs of trouble were already quietly surfacing. Standing a few bays down, observing with the trained eye of a 30-year veteran, Phil Mickelson noticed subtle flaws that the casual broadcast audience completely missed. During his final approach drills on the practice tee, Scottie's standard high-draw iron shot, the one that had generated a mind-boggling greens and regulation stat at St. Jude, was inexplicably falling short and right. On 3 consecutive 7-irons, the ball flight was flatter, losing its usual piercing trajectory, leaving his caddy quietly adjusting alignment sticks with an unusual sense of urgency. To the average fan, it looked like a standard warm-up routine. To a 56-year-old veteran who has spent his entire life studying swing dynamics under pressure, it was a clear warning signal. The world number 1 did not have his normal control. When Scottie finally stepped onto the first tee, the visual contrast became undeniable. The swagger from Sunday had evaporated, replaced by a subtle, rigid tension in his setup. His initial drive found the fairway, but the authority behind the strike was missing. Phil watched from the perimeter as Scottie pulled his second shot into the heavy greenside rough. A simple distance control error, but one that Scottie rarely makes on a Thursday morning. What the crowd assumed was a routine rust-shaking opening hole was actually the first domino in a rapidly unfolding crisis. Scottie managed to salvage par on the first, but the underlying mechanics remained unstable. The absolute dominance that defined his entire season was suddenly teetering on a knife's edge, leaving Phil and every onlooker to wonder how long he could mask a swing that was rapidly losing its rhythm before the scoreboard reflected the truth. By the time Scottie Scheffler reached the 5th tee, The faint cracks visible on the practice range transformed into a full-scale structural collapse. The smooth, effortless tempo that had dominated the tour all season vanished entirely. What unfolded over the next 2 hours was a complete breakdown of his world-class rhythm, sending shock waves across Bellerive. It began on the fifth hole with a pulled approach shot that caught the deep greenside bunker. A routine save turned into a nightmare when his bunker shot released 20 feet past the pin, leading to his first bogey. But one mistake quickly compounded into a total loss of distance control. On the very next hole, Scottie stood on the tee of a long par 4, a hole where he had consistently hit fairways for years, and flared a wildly offline drive deep into the right tree line. It was a mistake so uncharacteristic, coming from a player whose driving metrics had led the PGA Tour for months, that even his caddy stood motionless on the fairway in disbelief. That wild drive triggered a nightmare stretch, 3 consecutive bogeys that erased any lingering shadow of his Sunday victory. Standing near the gallery ropes, Phil Mickelson tracked the physical decay in real time. Phil didn't just watch the golf ball, he watched Scottie's posture after every single swing. Following a missed 6-foot scramble on the 7th hole, Scottie leaned heavily on his putter, hands resting on his hips, taking deep, labored breaths as his face flushed bright red under the hot afternoon sun. His chest heaviness and slouched shoulders revealed a player struggling simply to maintain his balance through the hitting zone. By the time he tapped in for his 4th bogey of the front 9, signing for a shocking front 9 score that placed him near the bottom of the leaderboard, the crowd was in absolute disbelief. The untouchable champion was suddenly staggering toward an opening 72, completely defenseless against a golf course he was expected to conquer. We are watching absolute dominance turn into survival mode in real time. If you think Scottie can shake this off by tomorrow, smash that like button, leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to catch part 2 of this coverage. As Scottie trudged toward the 10th tee box, the atmosphere around his group had completely shifted. The gallery was no longer cheering for birdie runs. They were whispering in hushed tones, watching a dominant athlete fight a private battle that was rapidly slipping away. Phil kept his eyes locked on Scheffler as he walked off the 9th green, recognizing the quiet desperation in his eyes, a look that usually signals a player whose body or mind is refusing to cooperate. The second Scottie Scheffler signed his card for an opening 72, he did something almost as shocking as his front 9 performance. He bypassed the extended media line entirely. Normally patient and open with reporters regardless of his score, Scottie offered only a few strained words in a noticeably raspy, hoarse voice before walking briskly past the cameras, heading straight for the privacy of the players' locker room. Within minutes, whispers began circulating through the clubhouse corridor. Insiders reported that Scottie had been battling a sudden, severe physical illness that escalated right before his morning tee time. However, the evidence inside the ropes told a far more complicated story. While illness might account for loss of stamina or late-round fatigue, it doesn't fully explain the stark mechanical contradictions captured on camera throughout his round. On several approach shots where Scottie had full, clean lies in the fairway, his club path swung dramatically inside out, a pure technical flaw that had nothing to do with physical energy, causing shots to start off-target and stay off-target. Furthermore, off-camera broadcast footage from the 7th hole captured Scottie exchanging tense, frustrated words with his team about his equipment setup and turf interaction, suggesting a deep-seated loss of trust in his swing mechanics rather than mere physical illness. This glaring contradiction created a growing debate among those following every shot. Was Scottie truly dealing with a sudden debilitating virus that temporarily stripped him of his physical talent, or was the severe illness serving as a convenient narrative shield to cover up a sudden alarming mechanical breakdown in his game right at the height of the FedEx Cup playoffs? Phil Mickelson, watching the scene unfold from a distance, knew that in high-stakes professional golf, physical ailments and mental doubts rarely exist in isolation. They feed on each other, turning a minor flaw into a total system failure. For Phil Mickelson, watching Scottie Scheffler's sudden unraveling was not merely a shocking Thursday afternoon headline, it was the replaying of a familiar, cruel cycle he has witnessed over 56 years of life in elite golf. Phil has spent over 3 decades walking these fairways. He watched the peak of Tiger Woods' absolute aura, saw Ernie Els and Vijay Singh reach heights where they looked physically immune to pressure, and then witnessed how rapidly those same icons lost their edge the moment a single doubt infiltrated their minds. Phil understands a fundamental truth that younger fans and casual observers often forget. In modern professional golf, the margin between pure dominance and total vulnerability is microscopic. When a player is operating at Scottie's level, every swing relies on precise neurological timing and complete trust. The moment physical fatigue or a sudden mechanical flaw forces a player to think consciously about their movement, the magic vanishes instantly. Phil recognized that precise shift the moment Scottie hesitated over his approach shot on the 6th hole. A subtle, half-second pause at the top of his backswing that signaled a mind suddenly at war with its own body. This visible crack in Scottie's armor sent an immediate psychological shockwave across the rest of the field. For months, rival caddies and players had entered tournaments playing for second place, subtly altered by the psychological weight of Scheffler's name atop the leaderboard. But as word of his opening round 72 spread through the clubhouse, the atmosphere at Bellerive shifted dramatically. The invincible monster of the FedEx Cup playoffs had suddenly been proven human. Rival players who had spent the week playing conservatively began adjusting their game plans, realizing that the door to a championship purse was suddenly flung wide open. Phil's veteran lens framed the broader reality. This wasn't just about one bad day in August. It recalled historical post-season collapses where a single, unexpected round of poor ball striking permanently disrupted a dominant player's momentum heading into the Tour Championship. As Phil watched Scheffler vanish into the clubhouse, he knew the psychological damage was already done. The field no longer feared Scottie Scheffler, and in golf, once the aura of invincibility shatters, rebuilding it mid-tournament is the hardest task in sports. The central question lingering over Bellerive isn't just what happened on Thursday, it's what this opening collapse portends for the rest of the postseason. Was Scottie Scheffler's front nine spiral merely an isolated bad day driven by a sudden physical illness? Or are we witnessing the first undeniable sign of mental fatigue fracturing modern golf's most dominant force? What began as a routine opening round at Bellerive evolved into one of the most compelling mysteries of the FedEx Cup playoffs. Phil Mickelson spent the afternoon watching an athlete who had seemed mathematically untouchable just 4 days earlier suddenly fight for his survival. Whether driven by a hidden physical illness or an alarming mechanical breakdown, Scottie Scheffler's aura of invincibility was completely shattered in a matter of 2 hours. The true stakes now shift entirely to Friday morning. To avoid missing the cut and watching his championship lead evaporate, Scottie must fix one critical element on the very first hole: his driver's face angle control at impact. On Thursday, his inability to square the club face cost him 4 strokes off the tee alone. If he adjusts his footwork and recovers his baseline tempo early, Thursday will be remembered as an isolated, heroic fight against sudden illness. But if those wild approach shots and hesitation at the top of his swing return, Bellerive will mark the beginning of an unprecedented postseason breakdown. Phil Mickelson's career proves that true greatness isn't defined when everything goes according to plan. It is revealed in how a champion responds when their body and mechanics fail simultaneously. As the rest of the field surges forward, all eyes remain fixed on the first tee box to see if the world's top player can reclaim his dominance or if the modern game is about to crown a new champion. Was this just an isolated bad round due to illness? Or are we watching Scottie's playoff run fall apart in real time? Sound off in the comments below, hit that subscribe button for full coverage of the next round, and I'll see you in the next video.